Today, we discuss Miro. Listen, when it comes to running client workshops, the dream, of course, is to get those creative juices flowing, right? But typically what ends up happening is thousands of hours get wasted because of poorly facilitated meetings. So I have Maya with me today. She's a consultant who runs Fortune 100 workshops, from leadership training to team building, and she has the insider tip on what makes things work. Maya?
Thank you, Jason. I've been doing this a long time. My number one tip is to bring everyone into that visual collaboration platform. So personally, I use Miro, and it's completely changed how I interact with the room. You have to give people a way to feel like they're in the room even when they're not. That's something you can do easily in Miro. Otherwise, they've seen the same slides and format 1,000 times.
Falling asleep, eyes glazing over, yawns, all that.
Exactly. When people follow me on the Miro board, everyone is literally going on a journey with me. We're adding thoughts, we're reacting, and we're voting for the best ideas. It's great.
Connective magic. I like it. That's MIRO.com.
At Discount Tire, we know your time is valuable. Get 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online. Did you know Discount Tire now sells wiper blades? Check out our current deals at discounttire.com or stop in and talk to an associate today. Discount Tire.
Let's get you taken care of.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AEye Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AEye Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AEye Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AEye Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick with Electricity Restored, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Solid 7 out of 10.
I'm about a 3. About a 3 out of 10. It is incredible how you take certain things for granted. And we had no power here for 36, 38 hours. And life was very weird. We had to trek 50 minutes to charge phones and torches and power banks and laptops and stuff, because we were assuming the power wasn't coming back till Thursday, because that's what we'd been told. And my mother was delighted she was going to get to see me more in a couple of days than she has in the last 3 months. But it turned out that wasn't the case. Power came back on this morning, but still a little bit rattled by it. I'm on another storm coming this evening, which is just lovely. We are here today to talk about Liverpool versus Fulham in the second leg of the League Cup semi-final. But before we get to that, because, you know, it's Fulham and it's the League Cup, so it doesn't really warrant the full hour, let us have a look at some of the transfers that have taken place during this window. So first things first, Karl, are you surprised how little movement there's been in this transfer window?
Not overly surprised, I don't think. I think it was always likely to be a bit quiet at the start. But I think the Premier League, if we look at movement as a whole, has been fairly slow this season. I'm thinking here in terms of managerial changes, in terms of teams either not starting as well as we expected them to, like to a wide extent. I think it's been a fairly calm Premier League start compared to previous years. I think that's probably what I would say it as. So I don't think that, you know, aside from a couple of teams that are right down at the bottom, that you would have expected too much immediate alterations. Like even, you know, obviously Everton with their points deduction, they were playing well enough and getting enough points that I don't think it's an immediate concern for them. And there's not really a battle of like 5-6 teams down at the bottom who need to strengthen to make sure they don't stay there. So I don't think I'm wildly surprised that it's been really quiet.
So one of the teams we probably would have expected to be busy would be Nottingham Forest, but obviously with them now under the hammer for potential FFP violation, or, you know, the failure to meet the profit and sustainability rules, they've had to be quiet. They might sell somebody and then look to bring in one or two. Like you said, Everton also they've had a points deduction, and they are staring at another one, so they can't really do anything. Let's actually just go through. So Arsenal have done nothing. A couple of players loaned out. Aston Villa, Costa Nedeljkovic from Red Star Belgrade, and I believe he will arrive in the summer. Bournemouth have done nothing. Brentford have signed Yunus Emre Konak from Sivasspor for 3.9 million. Don't know a whole lot about him, I have to say. Brighton have signed Adrian Mazulu from Romania and Valentin Barco from Boca Juniors, who's very highly regarded. And they're being linked to one or two other moves. So we'll see what they do. Burnley added David Datro Fofana from Chelsea. That one seems like a clever move to me because they definitely needed someone who could, do the scoring of the goals. Chelsea, maybe surprising, haven't done anything yet other than a couple of loan recalls. Everton haven't done anything. Fulham haven't done anything. Liverpool, it's just loan recalls. Luton have signed Tom Holmes from Reading for £1 million. Manchester City have signed Nahuel Feresi from Sao Paulo for 3.7. Oh, no, sorry, they've sold him. And then you start to look up and down at the rest of the clubs that have, maybe got things to do. Newcastle, no business. Forest, no business. Sheffield United, they signed Ben Brereton Diaz on loan from Villarreal, where interestingly he's been replaced by Goncalo Guedes. Spurs brought in Timo Werner on loan and Radu Dragusin of Genoa for 25 million, which is the big move of the window so far. No business from West Ham other than the sale of Connor Coventry. And Wolves, it's just a couple of loans and loan recalls. So very, very little business. Only Brighton and Spurs have actually signed players who are going to join now. And that just, what are we? We're 23 days in. That just seems very, very little to have been done. Oh, and Sheffield United with Brereton Diaz on loan.
Yeah, look, January is always a little bit chaotic right at the end. And then we always sort of look back and say to the teams, well, you wanted someone, why have you left it until the last few days? Perhaps this year that will exacerbate itself in terms of meaning that a few more deals don't get done in the last few hours. If there are teams trying to bring people in and sell them on, well, someone's got to move first, so some of those deals might not get done in the end, even more than usual. I don't really understand it when teams suddenly make bids at 11 o'clock or 10:30 at night or whatever and try to get it over the line, and we missed out by 3 minutes. Yeah, but you didn't start it until the final 0.4% of the whole window. So whether that will be an increased knock-on effect this time around, we'll have to wait and see. If it is, obviously there's not going to be much sympathy from anywhere around. Again, I mean, there's not usually big money deals done in January either. It is usually a lot of loans, recalls from loans, player contract cancelled and then signed for someone else on a free, that kind of thing. So you'll get the odd few big deals done or younger players signed for 18 months or so, 6 months or 18 months of sort of integration and then come into the team. But I just think that because of the way the bottom of the table is, that stuff doesn't usually affect the top clubs. They'll just do the deals as and when they can anyway. It's very rare that you'll get someone signed from, let's say, a Champions League challenging side and they'll be like, this is the guy who's going to make the big difference for us. Unless they were already planning to sign that player anyway and it just suddenly happens to be that they can sign them, like Luis Diaz, for example. It just became available then instead of in the summer. So I think it's really down at the bottom where we would normally get these deals. I mean, a team like Tottenham are obviously still trying to reconstruct themselves to an extent. So Dragusin is obviously a part of that. Timo Werner, I suspect, is fairly opportunistic because of his situation at Leipzig and just the fact that they've, maybe got one or two players in the attacking line who they're not finding is quite at the level or consistency level that Ange wants them to be. So, yeah, I'm not massively surprised. We may well get a couple of big sales and then people start spending money, and that has a knock-on effect in the last week. But again, I don't think that it's going to be an enormous close to the window.
I think if you look at last January, obviously Chelsea skewed everything last January with Enzo, with Mudryk. We got Anthony Gordon going to Newcastle for 40 million from Everton. We obviously signed Cody Gakpo, Badiashile and Mudeki both went to Chelsea, as did Malo Gusto. You had two relegation-threatened sides who would go down and spend big money on Jorginho Rutter to Leeds and Kamaldeen Sulemana to Southampton. Leandro Trossard and Jakub Kivor both went to Arsenal as they tried to put the hammer down and go for the title, but ultimately failed to do so. Bournemouth, who were scrapping against relegation, they went big and brought in Zabarni and Ouattara. Nottingham Forest, in their bid to stay in the division, they signed Danilo. Chelsea also signed Andre Santos because, you can just, why not sign everybody? But those are kind of the big deals from last year. And like you said, I suppose, do you think, is it the makeup of the league this year? Because it does kind of look like we've got three teams that are a couple below the rest. And maybe they're not willing to spend big because they don't view their chances of survival all that highly. Two in particular in Sheffield United and Burnley, who've gone the loan route, bringing in Datro Fofana and Brereton Diaz, rather than, spending money to address the other issues that they have in their team.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said before, I think the fact that we don't have 5-6 teams who are scrabbling down at the bottom or trying not to be in the relegation zone, it does make a big difference. It doesn't force those Bournemouths, Nottingham Forests, those kind of ones to go out and immediately reinforce the squad with, maybe 2-3 players. You look at what Bournemouth did last year, and we spoke about it, a good few times. They did go quite big. They also brought in a couple who they knew would be good for them this season and beyond in, people like Zabani, who we spoke about a lot at that time. And I think that that's proven to be a positive thing, a wise decision that they made in the end. But they were kind of pushed to make the decision by the fact that obviously they were down there-ish. So in that respect, we don't have that this year because we don't have to have it. I think that that's the biggest thing. The threat of going down is always the biggest push to make important moves and changes in the squad which matter. And there just isn't that for enough teams this year.
I do wonder if the Forest and Everton punishments had been doled out in this window, and it doesn't look like they will be. It looks like it'll be February or March before they find out whether they're going to be docked 10 points. I do wonder if they were docked the 10 now, might we see a bit more from Burnley, from Sheffield United, from Luton, and from those two clubs? Because, you look at the table right now, Forest have 20 points, Everton 17, Luton 16, Burnley 12, Sheffield United 10. If Forest got their 10 points deducted, they would go below Burnley but be above Sheffield United on goal difference, and Everton would go right to the foot of the table. And maybe then Burnley and Sheffield United in particular would look at it and say, well, look, what we need to do is match Everton's results, match Forest's results, and just, overhaul each other or overhaul Luton, and we're fine. So let's spend a bit of money now. But as there's quite a bit of uncertainty around both of those punishments for the moment, and personally, I think the Forest one is quite unfair because 2 of the years that they're counting towards Forest are years outside the Premier League. And I think Forest have been punished for ambition here because they had to spend to get themselves into the Premier League. And then they had to spend to stay in the Premier League. And I think if we punish teams for doing that, we're just going to end up with the same 3 teams being relegated and then promoted every single year. It'll be 6 teams. 3 will go down, 3 will come up. Then the 3 who have come up will go back down, and the 3 who went down will come back up. And we'll end up in this endless circle with these teams because they get the benefit of having had the Premier League parachute payment and being able to sell Premier League caliber players in order to fund their campaign in the Championship and stay within compliance. You look at what Leeds did this summer, you look at what Southampton did this summer, and you look at what Leicester did this summer. And if I'm not mistaken, they're 3 of the top 4 in the Championship right now. And Ipswich are wobbling a little bit. And it'd be no surprise if those 3 teams ended up as the top 3 and ended up coming back up while Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United go down. And then it would be no surprise to me in 12 months' time if the same 3 teams went down, Leicester, Leeds and Southampton, while Sheffield United, Burnley and Luton come back up, because the teams coming back up will get punished for spending to try and stay in the division. I think they've been punished for ambition. Everton are being punished for incompetence. There is no excuse, none whatsoever, for losing that much money when you're a founding member of the Premier League and you've been getting Premier League TV money every single year. There is no excuse for Everton not being in compliance. So I think the punishment for Forest is wrong. I think Everton are just unfortunate because it'll be their second punishment of a year. And people are saying that next year they're facing another punishment. And if they go down, it's almost certain that they'll get another punishment because they'll have no way of rectifying their books. So even if they stay up, if Everton manage to stay up somehow after having 20 points deducted, in all likelihood they're going to have to sell one or both of Onana and Branthwaite just to balance their books out before they consider doing any spending. So they're in a mess. Forest, like I said, I think it's just they're being punished for ambition. And I do wonder if the other clubs, as well as, you know, those points deductions not being handed out, they're also looking at it and going, well, hang on, if we spend, especially Burnley, who spent in the summer, if we go and spend money now and stay up, will we get punished for that next season because we won't be in compliance with the FFP rules? So I think you're hampering competition in some ways with some of these rules when clubs have been punished for years that include years where they weren't in the Premier League.
Yeah, I must admit, I didn't initially realise that, you know, obviously there's going to be a sliding scale and Forest have got fewer years, so therefore they can have fewer millions spent. And I think that that's fine. But I do, like you say, think that there needs to be...
Are you that person who has everything? The coolest merch and those must-have fan threads? Well, over at our Anfield Index shop, we've gone that extra mile when it comes to pimping up your Liverpool collection. From our popular range of bespoke design t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies and hats, to our signature edition mugs, prints and coasters, all provided with fast worldwide shipping. We have something for every red. We also stock official LFC merchandise and are licensed with the Premier League and UEFA to sell official iron-on shirt badges and sleeve patches. As a listener to this podcast, you can get 10% off everything with coupon code AEyePro10. Just head over to AnfieldIndex.shop or find us on Etsy by searching for Anfield Index.
An acceptance of what the Premier League has created to the necessity of doing to get there in the first place. And maybe that's not all accounted for in this FFP. But also what we probably have to acknowledge is that this is really the first time that FFP has been truly tested on a consistent basis. And so there is going to be some discrepancies, some deficiencies, some probably bad rulings within that. And that will have to obviously be sorted out as time goes on. But that's of absolutely no help whatsoever to teams like Nottingham Forest and that now. So it is a problem to be fixed, but I don't think that there's likely to be anything they overcome for this particular round of frustrations, charges, whatever you want to call them.
No, I agree. I kind of feel like clubs who get promoted should get a 2-year grace period. And then after that, they've got to get their, you know, because 2 years is what it takes to sort of establish yourself in the Premier League. And I feel like clubs should be allowed to spend the money that's required to do that. Because, like, as good as the Championship is, and it's a great league to watch, there's loads of fantastic players, and it's such a competitive league. The gulf between it and the Premier League is enormous, absolutely enormous. Like, if we look at the Premier League table and Luton have 16 points, then it's Everton with 17. But Everton should have 27. Like, let's not forget that. Everton would have 27 points if it hadn't been for the deduction. So Luton, who've done, I think, far better than anybody expected to this point in the season, they'd still be 4 points off a Forest team who've already sacked their manager this year, who are performing at a level that their ownership has deemed completely unacceptable. Then it's another point to Crystal Palace, who, according to certain reports and rumours, are on the brink of a managerial change themselves. Then it's another point to Brentford, who've been decimated with injuries all season and had their best player missing up until the last game week. And then it's 2 more points to Fulham. Like, the gap between the 3 teams that came up.
At Discount Tire, we know your time is valuable. Get 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online. Did you know Discount Tire now sells wiper blades? Check out our current deals at discounttire.com or stop in and talk to an associate today. Discount Tire.
Let's get you taken care of.
And the teams that were already in the division was pretty enormous. And, like, let's remember, this is only Forest's second season. So they're still trying to find their footing as well. I just think it's really unfair on teams to have them, like, every club in the Championship loses money. That's just the nature of the Championship. You're going to lose money because you're not in the Championship just to be in the Championship. You're in the Championship to try and get into the Premier League because that's where everybody wants to be. So you're spending money to get into the Premier League. And all of these clubs, Brentford did it. They were making, as well run as they are, they were making a loss in the Championship, even with some exceptional player trading. Bournemouth were making a loss in the Championship. Brighton were making a loss when they were in the Championship. Villa made huge losses when they were in the Championship. They were all recently promoted teams. You have to lose money in the Championship. It's just the nature of it. And then to come up into the Premier League and be told, okay, so you've lost all this money in the Championship now, so you can't really spend now that you're up, because you have to make sure that you don't lose more than 105 million over 3 years. I just think that's very uncompetitive and it's unfair. Like, there will always be a club like Luton who'll come up and think, you know what, we don't want to overspend here. What we're going to do is we're going to build a really good Championship team. We're going to have a good go. And if we stay up, brilliant. If we don't, we're going to go down with a team that's ready to compete at the top of the Championship. Norwich have done it in the past. But for a club like Burnley who've come up, they've spent money, they've been aggressive, they've been ambitious. If they stay up, well, the likelihood is that they'll get punished next season and they'll get docked 10 points at some point. And then that puts them at a huge disadvantage again. And it will be because they've been ambitious. It's not like an Everton situation where it's incompetence. I feel like we need a bit more grey area when it comes to profit and sustainability, and we need some sort of exceptions built in.
Yeah, I don't think that there should be an absolute grace period, like, you know, a free-for-all for a year or 2 years or anything, but it definitely does need to be more of a sliding scale of what is acceptable and what is not, and the timings of that. Because, like you say, it's very, very difficult to come up and have a Premier League ready team if you're not going to spend any money. But by the same token, obviously, if you let them come up and spend what they want in that first year, then you're skewing competition the other way. You're letting a Burnley get a player that Crystal Palace can't afford, for example, even though in most situations that Crystal Palace might well be the more attractive option. And so I do think that there needs to be...
Sorry, when I say a grace period, what I mean is you don't get punished in the first 2 years, but in year 3, you have to balance your books. So you can come up and spend whatever you need to spend in the first 2 years, but your 3-year accounting period is at the end of that 3rd year. So it does account for years 1 and 2. So you still have to be careful. You can't come up and just blow 300 million.
Yeah.
But you can't get punished in the first 2 years, would be more my point.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I say, as long as there's more accountability or some more flexibility somewhere along the way, then yes, that's going to be more applicable to having a competition, let's say, rather than just, like you say, a group of 14, 15, 16 teams. Otherwise, it is going to be just effectively a Premier League 1 and a Premier League 2, and the ones who are in there are just going to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Project Big Picture got floated, one of the reasons they floated it was to make the league more competitive. Like, it was, as much as it was skewing in favor of the Big Six, it was also an attempt to lift the bottom of the league up and rein back in your Manchester City, your Chelsea. Like, let's not pretend that the owners of Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester United haven't spent the last 20 years looking at the way Chelsea spent money under Abramovich and under Todd Bowley now, and looking at the way City have spent money, and throwing their arms up in the air and saying, well, hang on a second. These clubs were, hello, I'm here to annoy you. I'm here to annoy you into listening to more of me and more of others on EPL Index. We don't just have the Anfield Index stuff. We've got EPL Index as well, which covers the entirety of the Premier League. And we have 3 podcasts and a whole bunch of really good writing on EPLindex.com. The podcasts are my own Two-Footed podcast, which is every day at 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, covering the whole league. We have A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. You know Tadiwa, he does Anfield Index. He presents A Tad Predictable before every Premier League match week. And then Kevin DeVries and his crew on the EPL Roundtable, they're every week after the Premier League match week. So make sure you listen to everything we're doing on EPL Index and follow us there on Twitter at EPL Index. Thank you. Bye-bye. Afterthoughts for decades, absolute decades. We have built our clubs in sustainable ways. Now, you can argue about United and sustainability when they've got that debt hanging over them, but they've built their clubs up historically with global fan bases earned by winning stuff the right way, quote unquote. Whereas Chelsea and City came along and just started spunking money left, right, and centre. In most cases, against the rules of the competition, but managing to hide it very well. So they wanted to eliminate that at the high end, but also to lift up the clubs at the bottom end. And one of the things they suggested, obviously, was the 18-team league. And one of the aims of that was to make it a bit more competitive, to not have a team 21 games into the season having 10 points. You know? I think there was more merit in Project Big Picture than it was given credit for. There was obviously flaws in it, no question. The same with the Super League. There was flaws in the Super League. There was a lot of merit to it as well. But yeah, I mean, I think because the Everton, like you said, this is the first time they've really hammered home the FFP and profit and sustainability rules at the Premier League level. We've seen it happen in the Championship and in League One a couple of times over the last few years. But it's the first time they're really doing it in the Premier League. And that probably did cause a number of clubs to pull back on moves that they had planned for this summer, or for this window, rather. Like, there probably was moves that Fulham wanted to make. There might have been moves that Everton or Nottingham Forest wanted to make. There's probably moves that Bournemouth want to make. But they're looking at their last couple of years' worth of accounting and thinking, well, actually, we can't. Because then next season, for the advantage we gain this season by getting the player, we lose next season because we're going to get hit with a 10-point deduction.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's overriding, or that is the overriding point of what it was all about. You know, you got to make them do it at the right times. You've got to make them not spend now and just think we'll worry about it later. They have to remain within the sustainability. That's the point of sustainability. It's not just kick it down the line. It's to make it what you can do now. It's just that I think because there has been either leeway given before or maybe different standards held before, or perhaps just not really anybody had that punishment before. That's what's given people the pause. It's not the fact that it's the rule or the fact that it's being implemented. It is the punishment, isn't it? That's the only thing that really they care about.
Yeah, completely. It is interesting that the top four, as yet, have not done anything. Villa signed a young goalkeeper for the future, but Liverpool, City and Arsenal have done nothing as yet. Newcastle, I mean, they've been quite open about the fact that they can't really afford to do anything at the moment. But there is now at this time a deal for Miguel Almiron to go to, I think it's Al Shabab in Saudi, that might open up a bit of wiggle room for them. Not sure what they would do with that money. I assume, given they have Harvey Barnes due back soon, the idea would be that they go Barnes, Isak, Gordon as a front three. But then there's no real depth behind that other than Callum Wilson. And he's being linked with a move to AC Milan. So they almost certainly have to bring in another attacker if Wilson and Almiron left. And then Trippier apparently could be away to Bayern Munich because Harry Kane has decided that learning German is just too difficult. So instead he's forcing Bayern to bring in bang average English players like Eric Dyer and Kieran Trippier. Which of those deals is the strangest to you, Karl? Callum Wilson to AC Milan, Kieran Trippier to Bayern Munich, or Miguel Almiron, who I would have said was one of the more important players at Newcastle over the last 18 months or so, potentially leaving to go to Al Shabab?
Almiron for me, just because of the because of the back of last season. That was comfortably his best campaign in England. He showed what he can be and what he was previously in MLS, and his capabilities when you're playing in a team which is attack minded and high up the pitch and able to counter as a unit rather than just him and maybe Joe Linton 60 yards apart from each other. So I think
the Steve Bruce special.
I think it's an odd time for him to go in terms of footballing. I don't want to say prestige, but certainly showing what he's capable of doing at the higher end of any league, I think Callum Wilson to Milan is not a bad fit, to be perfectly honest, like a decent player for a team at that level. Obviously, Serie A, the very, very top end, I don't think is as elite as the top end of the Premier League. So I think he'd be a very good forward for them, probably a very good fit for them. And I do think he is replaceable as a forward for Newcastle as well, to be fair. So I don't think that's a bad one at all. Trippier is obviously a bit of an odd one for Bayern, but relatively short term. He's already played abroad. They need cover in that area. And let's be honest, his last month with Newcastle was, there's bad months and then there's fallen off the cliff in the way he did. And I've no doubt that if he comes back and carries on, he'll be perfectly fine again afterwards. But, it was such a bad drop off that he had as a result of maybe overplaying, others around him, just general loss of form and bad luck probably as well. So I wouldn't be hugely surprised if he left. I never really thought that he was, a 4-year player for Newcastle or anything like that. So definitely Miguel Almiron's choice of departure, let's say, would be the one for me if it happens.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Al Shabab, they own Yannick Carrasco. He's there at the moment. And Romain Saiss is there on loan from Al Sadd in Qatar. They also have Habib Diallo, who's not bad, and a couple of other players that I don't really... Iago Santos, I'm not familiar with. Gustavo Cuellar, don't know him. Kim Sung-gyu, that's the South Korean national team goalkeeper, so he's there too. They're not one of the big four in Saudi Arabia, though they have won 6 league titles, so they're probably the biggest club outside the big four. Al Nazir, Al Hilal, Al Ahly, and Al Ittihad. They're probably the number 5 club there in terms of success and history. But
we're not having a big four for Saudi Arabia.
There's not a big four, but what there is there's 4 clubs. No, there's 4 clubs owned by the PIF.
Yes,
who are spending more than the other clubs that are also secretly owned by the PIF. Is what I mean.
Yes.
There's the 4 clubs the PIF admit to owning. And then there's the other clubs that they don't admit to owning, but they're definitely funding as well. I think that would be the weirdest one as well. The only thing I would say, though, is if Wilson goes and Trippier goes, they have, like, I mean, Isak is the first choice striker. Wilson was very much his backup anyway. But with Wilson gone, they'll need to bring in another striker because you can't just run Isak into the ground week in, week out. We've already seen him have a couple of spells out with injury since joining the team. And at right back, they bought Tino Livramento, who is really, really good and is going to be, I think, a top player. But they've got no depth behind him, and then they'll just run him into the ground as well. Now, he'll be able to take it maybe a bit more than Trippier because he's 21, 22 rather than 33, 34. But he is also not long back off an ACL tear, and whether you should be overplaying him is definitely up for debate. What they really need, Karl, is a big sale that will enable them to go and buy 3 or 4 players to flush out the squad. And I feel like that was going to be Guimaraes until Tonali got his ban. I've always felt like Tonali was bought to replace Guimaraes rather than play with him. And given they gave him a buyout, given they gave him a weird buyout that can be paid in installments, I kind of feel like when Newcastle re-upped Guimaraes, it was almost like a thing of, look, here's extra money because you've been great, but you're leaving at some point because for us to continue to move forward, because of the microscope that Newcastle are operating under, they're going to have to, I think, sell him. And that will then enable them to flush out their squad and then, use whatever money they can bring in through commercial deals or TV rights or whatever to then improve the team. So, like, if you sold Guimaraes, could you go and buy, a backup forward, a backup fullback, and maybe one starter and maybe another centre-back? Maybe you get a young centre-back to come in. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's their best move, is to flip Guimaraes, make a huge profit on him, obviously, and then turn that into 3 or 4 players. And then in time, perhaps, you do this Isak, where you buy his replacement in advance, then you sell Isak, and then you reinvest that money into 3 or 4 players. And it becomes more of a slow build than I'd imagine what the PIF thought they'd be able to do, but it becomes a sustainable build as well, and one that doesn't draw massive attention from the powers that be.
Yeah, I think that's sensible and probably what they will have to do. I also think that that's, more or less replicating what most teams try to do. So, yeah, that is kind of what you should be doing. Obviously they have a little head start themselves because they had the money to make the first purchases anyway, which not all clubs have. So they had that little injection of cash. But then selling one to buy 2 or 3 and improving the squad, that's what all the teams have been doing anyway. The Brightons, the Bournemouths, the Liverpools, all at different levels, but that's what they've been doing. You make your sales and then you improve as you go along. And obviously at the same time, people like Dan Ashworth have spoken about where Newcastle need to improve off the pitch as well to generate extra funds there. So it doesn't have to be all about sales, but they've got a long path to travel on that commercial and club strength side of things, let's say. So in the short term, it is definitely Guimaraes and Isak who are the main ones. I'd probably also include Anthony Gordon in that, just because of the fact he's English and has, the capacity to score more goals and have more final third end product than he has. If he does that, he will become a valuable commodity. Even if he's not the best forward out there, he's still got attributes which top teams want and eventually need when they're playing in Europe, obviously, with homegrown rules and all the rest. So you'll probably be able to add him to that list somewhere along the way. But yeah, other than that really is the only way they've got forward now, especially with having almost hamstrung themselves a little bit, spending so much, as they had to escape the part that they were in. They basically used up their free hit on doing that first part rather than the get from 10th to 4th kind of part, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I mean, Anthony Gordon, he just screams Manchester United or Chelsea, doesn't he? He just screams that he's going to be someone that one of them would overpay for.
Man United.
If he was to hit a hot run of form, Yeah, like if he was to hit a hot run of form at the end of the season and get like, let's say he gets 8 goals in the last 10 games or something, and Toon make it known, through different people in the media, Luke Edwards or whoever's close to them, that they'd be open to selling for 70 million. It just screams like something United or Chelsea would do. He's enough of a prick to fit in with either as well. And that would represent a £30 million profit.
Yeah, it would. The profit is obviously an important factor. I would also could quite conceivably see United paying a sort of Jadon Sancho amount of money for him to effectively replace Sancho, even though it doesn't really solve the positional problems that they've had in the squad before and after Sancho.
Yeah, nothing would be more Manchester United, who already have Marcus Rashford and Garnacho for that left-sided role, than to bring in another player who prefers to play in the left-sided role for a huge amount of money to replace a guy who prefers to play in the left-sided role and was signed for a huge amount of money. It would be very United. Maybe there's a deal for Toon where they could take back Sancho and cash, so they get a really good player back out of the deal and some money to buy something else. And personally speaking, I think Sancho's a much better footballer than Anthony Gordon. It's just that, the Sancho at Newcastle, at Manchester United thing, that's over. He's not going back there, barring a change in manager. And even then, given some of the stuff that's leaked out about him and been very purposefully leaked out about his behavior and his lateness and stuff like that, I'm not sure he's going to go back there either way. Let's move on then to tomorrow night's victims, Fulham. Liverpool obviously hold an advantage from the first leg, winning 2-1 at Anfield. Now, Fulham have played since then, sorry. Fulham played Chelsea 3 days later and lost 1-0 to a Cole Palmer penalty in stoppage time at the end of the first half. Gave a decent showing of themselves, but nothing I don't think that would cause us much worry. We obviously beat Bournemouth 4-0 at the weekend. The scoreline that maybe flattered us a small bit, but hence went about our business in a very professional manner. And it's worth noting that of the 1.37 XG they accumulated in the game, 0.95 of it came after the fourth goal.
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac, and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mag boxes, and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
When we were just, taking the foot off the pedal and just kind of cruising through the rest of the game, they had the two big chances. One for David Brooks, one for Kiefer Moore, which was most of their XG in the game. We've gotten good news today, injury-wise. Curtis is fine. No injury from the weekend. Andy Robertson is back in full training and is available for the Fulham game. Dominic Szoboszlai is back in full training, will be available for Norwich at the weekend. And potentially Trent could be available for Norwich at the weekend as well. So that's all very, very positive.
Yeah, all really good. Quite important that we get one of the fullbacks back at least, I think. I think the guys who have come in have been really, really good. Nobody has really put in even a substandard performance, let alone a poor performance, I don't think. But there's still obviously consistency questions with some. There's still the fact that others have suffered injuries, or in the case of obviously the young players, haven't had to play the games regularly on a long-term basis. So the longer we do rely on them, the more chance there is of mishaps, either form or fitness. So it is important that we get at least one of those back so that we can start rotating in and building them back up and not having to rely on everybody else. Obviously, that could in time free up Gomez to be another central defensive option as well, which is again going to be important across the rest of the season. So it's quite positive. I think we've done really well to manage the injuries at the back in the way that we have done, probably in midfield as well. Very glad that Curtis is not going to be an absentee, because we don't have that many options. Like, we can't even really consider Thiago and Bajcetic as options in midfield because they haven't been all season long. So we are a little thin there. But like I say, we've managed it really, really well. We've probably been slightly fortunate in when the games have come out over the last month and which competitions they've been in. But even so, we've still been winning them, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed with Curtis. Like, he's been so important to us of late. Like, he's one player that I don't think we can afford to lose right now, especially with Endo being away. I think Curtis is all the more valuable because he is outstanding defensively, as good as he is on the ball and all that he can offer going forward. Of the three midfielders that are currently starting, which McAllister and Jones, I think Jones is the best of them defensively. Even though McAllister has great defensive stats, I'm not talking purely about, tackles and interceptions. Curtis is the best presser. He's also the best at tracking runners. He's the best at blocking passing lanes. He's the best at doubling up with his fullback against an attacking wide player. I think all of these things are hugely important for us while we don't have that sort of natural number 6. Fulham, they're just a strange team, Karl. Like, they're kind of a bang average mid-table team. Sit 13th, 24 points from 21 games, 28 goals scored. Most of them came in a 4-game run, 36 goals conceded. I don't think have they been shellacked this season in the league? City beat them 5-1. We scored 4 past them in a game that they also scored 3 in. But they seem to concede multiple goals every game. And they don't have great firepower. And you look at it and you think, we should beat them comfortably. And I do think we will beat them. But for some reason, they make me nervous. For some reason, I don't like playing Fulham under Marco Silva. I just think the way he sets them up and the way they move the ball into wide areas and create chances, it just seems to cause us some problems. And it really should, because they're not a good attacking team.
Yeah, they do seem to score against us and create a lot of chances against us. I think partly it's the similar sorts of problems that we've had previously. We have had games where we've really struggled against teams who attack very fast down the flanks, who have runners in behind, that sort of thing. Not necessarily every single game, but just certain opponents. And sometimes, someone like Bobby De Cordova-Reid, he always seems to cause us problems, to be perfectly honest. He always seems to be capable of scoring. De Cordova-Reid always creating chances against Liverpool, or he's the danger man who makes the runs in behind and so on. So, yeah, I understand it. Sometimes there's just a team who maybe not has your number, but certainly gives you more sleepless nights than they do against other clubs. Ultimately, we've beaten them every time still. And that's, like you, I expect us to still do that again. There is the added factor of obviously playing for a final, playing for a space in the final, playing for, an opportunity to get into Europe for them, for a trophy, all the rest of it. So it's going to be difficult. It'll still be them at the very top of their game and giving everything that they can. But as I said before, I still expect that we would triumph because we know how to do those things. We expect to do those things off ourselves. And obviously, we've also had the fairly consistent manner of proving that we can do it. So I would expect Liverpool still to come out on top, but I don't think that this is an easy one. I don't think this is a game we win, 2-3-0 or win on aggregate by more than a goal or two. It's going to be fairly tight and tough.
Yeah, that's exactly my thoughts on it. This is the likelihood is if we win this game, we win it by the odd goal, rather than going there and putting 3 or 4 past them and coming away very comfortable. Injury-wise, we know where we stand. Like you said, we shouldn't really be talking about Thiago or Bajcetic anymore because they haven't played all season. Bajcetic has played, 2 sub-appearances, or 1 start and 1 sub-appearance. And he hasn't kicked the ball since mid-September. Thiago hasn't kicked the ball all season. Matip is out for the year. That's unfortunate. Mo, he's injured, but he'd be away anyway, so we weren't counting on him. And the same goes for Endo. He's away. But Curtis is fine. Robbo's fine. Trent and Dominic are working their way back. Costas isn't very far away. I did note, though, there was mention that Costas had surgery, which is strange because within 2 weeks of his injury, he was back running, and that's not necessarily something that you'd be doing after, collarbone or shoulder surgery. So I'm not really sure what's gone on there. Fulham, though, they've got very few issues. Adama Traore is injured. Calvin Bassey and Alex Iwobi are both away, and as is Fode Ballo-Toure, who never plays anyway. The Iwobi absentee is sort of the big one that I would look at there, because Bassey, I know, is a starter for them, but I mean, it's not like Diop and Tosin and Tim Ream aren't all good centre backs. They're all fine. You're not really missing Bassey a whole lot. I do think they miss Iwobi and the pace and power he adds to their midfield. I think the midfield's a little bit one-paced without him.
Yeah, he's the ball carrier, isn't he? He's the one who can break lines without having to actually pick a pass through the midfield, or make a deep run to make an extra attacker in the final third. He's the one who can carry the ball there centrally. He can dribble it past people. He's really, really good at doubling up down the flanks. You can use him anywhere you want in the midfield line, across 5 positions, basically. I think he's such a good player, to be perfectly honest. He is a miss for them, but they do still have quite a solid, let's say, team without him. Even if he's not there, they don't lack for physicality in midfield. They don't lack for speed or guile. They have other players who can do each thing. I think that he's just the one who can do all of those things for them.
So, Liverpool's team. Caoimhin Kelleher, I assume, retains his place in goal because this is sort of his competition.
For sure.
Joe Gomez, right back. Andy Robertson, left back.
I mean, it really depends. Linda said Robertson had only had 1 training session, hadn't he? So 13 weeks out is quite a lot. I'd probably be tempted to
There was a shoulder injury. It's not like it was a muscle or anything.
I know, but 13 weeks out is still a lot to, losing in terms of touch and sharpness. And, it is a semi-final. I think I'd still be tempted to start Randall and Gomez. Conor Randall? That's not right. Conor Bradley. Let's pick the right one. Randall's not here anymore. He hasn't been for years. Conor Bradley and Joe Gomez as fullbacks, and bring Robertson on as and when, let's say.
So in Conor Randall, for anybody wondering, is currently playing for Ross County in the Scottish Premiership. Has got on to have himself, a solid career. At centre-back then, do you go Ibu and Virgil, assuming Ibu is okay after the knock he took, and then look at maybe, say, Kwanzaa and Gomez to start against Norwich? Yeah, okay. Midfield, Harvey, Alexis and Curtis again?
Are we assuming Dominic is not back for fitness because he appears to be okay?
Linder said this game would come too soon for him. He'd be back for Norwich.
Fair enough. Maybe Gravenberch for this one over Elliott.
Oh dear. I'm not sure I could watch Ryan Gravenberch shit himself in tackles against Jay Polina, to be honest. In attack, then I assume the same 3 that started against Bournemouth start here.
Yes,
I don't see any reason to change it.
Yeah, I thought they were a really good second half. They were working well in tandem with each other. So I'd be happy to keep the same 3.
Cool. For them, I mean, I assume it's Leno in goal, Kenny Tete or Castagnier right back, Robinson left back, Diop and Tosin in the middle, unless Tim Ream gets called in. In midfield, I assume we'll see João Palhinha and Harrison Reed. And then I think he'll go De Cordova, Reed, Pereira, and Willian behind Raul Jimenez.
Sounds about right to me.
And what's your prediction?
I'm going to go for the same score as the first leg, so 2-1 Liverpool.
I'm going to go 2-0. I'm going to back Virgil and Ibu to just be absolutely monstrous again and get us a clean sheet. Right. Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
No, since I've been off work, not a lot at all.
Well, for some. When's the next holiday? Where are we away to next?
Probably not until March to Rome. There's a marathon in Rome we'll be going to, so probably that, to be honest.
Are you running in the marathon?
I was potentially doing so, but actually I managed to pull a hamstring last night at 5-a-side, so no, I won't be because there's not enough training time now.
Oh, lovely. Well, hopefully that is something that recovers quickly. See, this is the risk of long haul flights before playing football. This is what happens, you know.
As Guy was saying before we started recording, me and Mo Salah exactly the same. Long haul flights, hamstring.
Exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same. Not until March. The 2 holidays in January, but you're meant to feel sorry for him because he's not away again until March. That's some life. Right, we will be back later in the week, and hopefully my internet will work properly, because otherwise I might lose my head. Right, folks, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
At Discount Tire, we know your time is valuable. Get 30% shorter average wait time when you buy and book online. Did you know Discount Tire now sells wiper blades? Check out our current deals at discounttire.com or stop in and talk to an associate today. Discount Tire.
Let's get you taken care of.